Hello and welcome to Barbara's Podcast. This is the show for women, all about health, nutrition, and wellness. It's the show that will empower you and inspire you to create a healthier lifestyle.
Welcome, I'm Barbara Carafocus, and I'm excited to introduce Mark Fox, who's the inventor of Vibe, an entrepreneur, scientist, engineer, author, creative thinking consultant, crop formation researcher, former space shuttle chief engineer, and a hot air balloonist, and he's built his own airplane. That is quite impressive. So,
Thank you.
welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As the inventor of Vibe, a pocket PEMF device, could you explain how this device works and the specific ailments it can provide relief for?
Yeah, it's the way it works is not completely understood, but magnetic therapies, have been around since 3000 BC or longer, right? So it's not a static magnet; it's a pulse, as you said, PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field. There's a whole bunch of theories on the biology and the physics and science of how it works, but in simple sense, all the cells in your body have an electrical charge on them, like a car battery or a battery. And when that charge gets worn down, you get sick. So we know that it recharges your cells' batteries, which allow your cells in your body to heal themselves. It's kind of like everyone knows a drug doesn't really cure anything. It just helps you float and keep going until your body can fix itself. So what it does is it recharges your cells' batteries. We know that. It's ATP. I'll probably say it wrong. Adenosine triphosphate. It's the main fuel that your body uses for food, for cells. Yeah. And it's been shown to increase that up to 500 to 600%. So again, it's recharging your cells' batteries, and it's giving you a lot more fuel for your cells to do what they need to do. Now in fact, I'm reading another book right now that's, I think, 700 pages thick on all the research and possible mechanisms of action and things that happen. But they're hard. A lot of them are hard to prove. And the debate I make, or the point I make, is as long as it's not hurting anybody, which has been shown to be super, super safe, and there's no side effects actually, except one, is that relief before reason, right? So, and you may never figure out exactly how the thing works, but that's what I just said. Recharging cells' batteries and ATP is the general consensus of what it's doing. What I said about side effects is I started to say none, but rarely what can happen. And the reason it's sharp on my mind, I just got off the call with somebody 10 minutes ago. Okay. If you have an infection in your body, it can make you feel sick sometimes. So usually one out of a couple hundred people will say, hey, it's making me feel sick. Go get a blood test. You have an impacted tooth, or your toe's infected. You've got infections somewhere. But besides that, there's no side effects. The only other one is if you're in severe pain. The first time you use it, don't be driving a car or operating a catapult, because it can get you stoned. Okay. And it's legal in all 50 states. That's the joke that we have, right? So what happens is it's been measured in the blood. Because the pain is suddenly gone, it releases a ton of endorphins. So you get that runner's high type thing. So that's it. That's kind of how it works. The protocols, there's lots of them. In my device, I have 55 of them. So for your audience, there's probably 4 or 5 that would come to mind. The first one is, and I'll tell you the story why, is PTSD/trauma. Yes. So that is the main thing that I concentrate on from clinical trials that I ran. So we have a 93% success rate with PTSD. I expected military men to be the target that would show up for the study. It was not. It was 90% civilian women. So things like bad boyfriends, husbands, miscarriages, car wrecks, life, okay, all of that stuff. So we've had a lot of success with that. So that's one of them, is PTSD and trauma. I can go through several other ones, but heart health, we have a protocol for that. We have one for breast health. we have one for weight loss, and I know everyone's ears just perked up.
Yeah.
So before you get too excited on the weight loss, the weight loss will work if you have weight gain or weight retention due to insulin resistance, which is
Okay.
about 1 in 3 people. So I get people really excited about the weight loss and they didn't lose weight and they yell at me. And I'm like, well, because fortunately, you're in that 2 out of 3 people that don't have weight due to insulin resistance. But there's that. Diabetes, we're getting ready, blood sugar. Okay. We're getting ready to launch. There could be placebos with this stuff, of course, with anything, but it's been interesting. It's like it's hard to fake blood sugar. And I've had friends who are diabetics and their blood sugar has gone down like on the first try. So I got anecdotal data that says it works very well for blood sugar reduction. But we're going to launching a clinical trial on that in a couple weeks to try and get all the statistical data. And then the last one, not the last one, but the one I would recommend for your audience is just relax and balance. That's the name of the protocol, which is think yoga, meditation, help you calm down. We have 5 new brainwave entrainment protocols. So if your audience is into yoga or meditation, while they're doing it, stick this in your pocket and just run brainwave entrainment for alpha. So there's one of the 5, and that will help. That's putting you in that alpha state, which is what you're trying to do anyway with yoga or meditation. So it just helps enhance that experience.
Yeah. Well, it sounds very, very interesting. What made you want to invent or create this?
So 20 years ago, that thing, my dog.
Yeah.
So she came to the bottom of the stairs. We were in Utah at the time, me and my wife, and she started crying. She couldn't make it up the stairs. And we're like, she's never done that before. So it's like, well, somebody's not going to work today, right? We have to go to the vet. So flip a coin, it was me. So I took her to the vet, and unfortunately she had really bad arthritis in her spine, to her whole spine. And there's a very good friend of mine who is one of the most forward-thinking veterinarians that I know. He said, hey, there's this lady in Oregon that has this magic machine that can reverse arthritis. I'm like, okay. So I set up an appointment to go get to take her up there. And unfortunately, she got so sick so fast, my vet said, don't put her in a car and do that to her, right? So he didn't. But that was about 20 years ago, and I was kind of interested in it and kept looking into the technology. And, I'm a rocket scientist. So I'm like, you can't do anything with frequencies and weird, right? It's like, I didn't really believe it, but I looked at it more and more, and there's more and more data. There's actually 30,000 published papers on this technology out there. So it's, and a lot of clinical trials, and people go, it's all voodoo. There's no research. There's tons of it. Okay. Tons of it. And so what I didn't like is the machines, and anyone that's, I've found, Barbara, about 1 in 20 people have heard of PEMF. And if they've heard of it, they usually think of a mat, like they've been to a chiropractor that has like a Beamer mat or one of those mats. So they're great, but they're $5,000, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to try and invent something that, hey, there's got to be a way to make this a simple consumer device. So I'm not an electrical engineer. My undergraduate's chemical engineering, but I'm granting myself an electrical engineering degree now after these years of catching things on fire, burning stuff up. It shouldn't have been this hard to get to where it's at, but it was. So that's what the goal was, is to make a consumable consumer device that people could use at home that's reasonably affordable, right? So that's what,
to make it available to a lot more people, at least.
a lot more people. And then if you're in severe back pain, you don't want to drive to the doctor's office twice a week anyway, right? And what's nice about it's the only pocket PEMF device that I know of in the world. So I was always telling people to wear it with a lanyard around your neck initially, but kind of like your necklace. But it's like, you know what? It works just as well in your pocket. So I forget it's there, right? I have one running right now for back pain. I just stick it in my pocket. You forget it's there. It runs and it does its thing. It doesn't make any noise, and it's doesn't make sound. It puts out a magnetic field. But it's most people can't feel anything except the results. but about 2 to 3% of the people will feel tingling and some other things. And I don't want to offend people, but if you're a high energy person or you see colors around people or auras and stuff, you will probably feel a little bit of tingling or something.
Just a funny question, but so when you're wearing it, you won't be able to perhaps wear a watch, an electronic watch, or
no, you can wear anything you want. You can wear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step over you, Barbara. I'm sorry. So you can wear it with the only thing we say don't use it with is if you have anything electronic in your body, like a pacemaker or an insulin pump. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have hip implants or any metal parts and stuff, that's fine. It doesn't bother that at all. It's just, and here's the reality of that. And I gotta be careful even saying this. It's just being on the side of caution. Also, if you're pregnant, don't do it. Okay. So, but there's no known side effects or any causes to that. In fact, for example, as energy level, this is about 9 Gauss. An MRI is going to be 50 to 100,000 Gauss.
Oh,
and
wow.
it used to be on an MRI that you could never have one if you had a pacemaker, but that's not true anymore. Now they're giving them with people watching them. So we just err on the side of caution is if you have a pacemaker, don't use it. But besides that, there's really no other restrictions. In fact, I tell people, don't change your medication. Don't do anything to start off with. Just see if it makes you feel better, keeping everything else the same.
Well, I think I'd be very curious to try it.
Oh, yeah. I'll get you one for sure.
Thank you.
I had to look up where Cyprus is, so I'll figure out how to ship one there. I was like, where is that? I had to go Google it. Google map it.
In the Mediterranean.
I know what it is now. I had to look it up and go, Cyprus, where's that at? Okay.
Well, you're welcome to come and visit.
Okay, I may do that.
So, with your background as a former space shuttle chief engineer, could you share some insights into the Challenger disaster? What really happened, and did it impact the space, and how it impacted the space exploration industry at the time?
Well, at the time, how it impacted it was we obviously didn't have access to space for astronauts because we were shut down for 2.5 years. But what everyone heard on the news is partially true, but for the most part, it's not. The O-rings on the solid rocket boosters, they did fail. Yes. Yeah. That is what caused it. But kind of the cause and effect thing, why did the O-rings fail? And everyone's answer was because it's too cold outside. Well, cold is in the direction of badness for rubber O-rings, but we had flown colder than that. And there's the main issue. So the O-rings were an issue, but they were like on a importance Pareto chart. They were way down in 3rd place, way down. So number 1 was the turbine blades on the main engines, the 3 main engines on the orbiter. If you think about this, it's a turbine blade about that, I can't see my hands, about that big around. It's going from 80 degrees Florida temperature, sitting still, to suddenly spinning 30,000 RPMs, and then it gets hit with liquid hydrogen and oxygen that's 420 below zero and 253. So the thermal shock to that blade is, it actually, Barbara, makes a metal that doesn't exist on the planet Earth. It changes the crystalline structure completely, so that if you're testing blades for strength, you have to run them on a test stand to create the metal because it okay, so that's, and they cracked, right? So they cracked a lot, and that's what everyone thought was going to happen someday if anything happened. And then the external tank has liquid hydrogen and oxygen in it, and it's 27 feet in diameter and very thin. So when you fill it, it actually shrinks about 1.5 feet. So it would crack as well.
Yeah.
So we know that the tank was leaking some, and we know that the boosters were colder. They were 9 and 14 degrees Fahrenheit. So we know, and it was 36 outside. So a lot of people went, it's wind chill. Well, wind chill does not exist unless you have a heartbeat. Right? You got to be a living thing to have wind chill. So we know that the external tank was leaking on it, which that is really what happened. Is you had cryogenic cold stuff on rubber that basically turned the O-rings to glass. So there's a lot more to the story, a whole lot more, but maybe one little piece of that is that the solid rocket boosters had never postponed a launch before because you hit go and they go, right? It's only the main engines doing their startup. So the launch before Challenger, the solid rocket boosters canceled the launch, and it's the first time ever because of the ocean waves.
Yeah.
So the ocean waves were too high that we almost lost a diver. You have to put a plug in there at the bottom to get the water out, and we almost killed a diver. So we changed the criteria. Well, the NASA manager was furious that we were going to cancel launch under his watch and his
Yeah.
clock. So the next launch that was Challenger was, what do you get? And a whole bunch of stuff happened. He's actually, what he said on that launch is, can we let him sink? Yeah, you're the customer if you want to do that. And so that was $20 million. And his pay grade, I think he was only allowed to scrap something like $5 million. So he got,
my goodness.
so some bean counter somewhere filled something out and got him in trouble. So he had to go explain to his bosses in NASA headquarters why he scrapped this. So now he's angry. So that was part of explain to me why it's not safe to launch, which had never been presented to us before, right? So that was a big part of it. And things like, is it out of specification? It's a trick question because there wasn't a specification for temperature.
No.
Not at the O-ring. So when you see the documentaries, and I've been asked many times to come speak at colleges about how stupid management was and all that. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. It's the space shuttle, like almost all rockets, it was a 30-year experiment. Elon Musk, it's still an experiment, right? They're rockets. So so a lot of other things, Barbara, went on, but it wasn't just black and white. It wasn't cut and dry. It's you can make them space shuttles super safe by putting one person on it in a backpack. But if you want to put 6 astronauts and 50,000 pounds of payload, satellites up there, you got to push it. Not as much as you would a weapon system, and it's got a lot of safety features, but it's still a gigantic rocket. So
it reminds me of a similar situation with Ocean Gate, the submarine that imploded.
Yes, yeah.
Using a new material, with a carbon fiber, and perhaps not testing it enough, not getting the certifications, and
Yeah, and it's funny you said that a little bit, because one of the things was after Challenger, the head of NASA said, talking engineering terms, he goes, I want 5 nines reliability. That's 1 in 10,000 failure with a 90% confidence level on every part.
Yeah.
So all the contractors went and did analysis, and it would have cost more per launch than all of the money GDP in 10 years.
Oh.
It's like, okay, it is zillions, past trillions of dollars. It would cost that much to build hardware if it was even physically possible, right? So there's always some risk, and the astronauts, I mean, I knew a lot of them. They all know what. It's not a surprise. They know what they're. It's a.
What they get, yeah.
It's a rocket that we're doing our very best to manage, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's sad for sure that it happened, but and then things it'll continue to happen in the future, right? I mean, you said something about the future space. No, you're going to keep pushing it and keep pushing it, and there's still going to be, if there's not failures, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It is. One of my friends in advertising, right? He measures how good the ad is by how many people complain. Because it means you're making enough noise that people heard you, right? I mean, He gets complaints all the time, say, stop running that ad. I can't get it out of my head. I hate that ad. Go fire your ad agency guy because he's an idiot. No, he's not, because it's in your head. Now you're thinking about their product.
So I'm very curious to hear about your that any problem can be solved with just one of 40 possible answers. Could you elaborate on the concept and provide some examples of how this approach can be effective in solving any complex problems or challenges?
Sure. Okay. So it's in the 1950s, a Russian scientist went into a library and he was looking around for books on creativity, and he couldn't find any.
Yeah.
So long story short, he ended up getting a grant from the Russian Navy. He did a whole bunch of research, and what they did is they looked at the time 300,000 patents.
Yes.
And what they found is these patents all fell into, surprisingly, just 40 categories. Like, they were solved in these 40 answers. So it's called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z, or TRIZ. It's a Russian acronym that stands for the Theory of Inventive Problem Solving, roughly. So the logic is, if the history, and it's been a couple million patents that they've looked at now, but if the history of creativity used the picture as a lens, right? I'm just going to put on a pair of glasses. I'm going to look at this problem or opportunity through that one specific lens, knowing I have a head start because history says things get invented this way by looking at it this way. So most of the people that teach it are Russian PhDs. Hopefully they're not on the call, because when they teach it, they're very, very boring. So the guy I was just referencing about the ads with complaints, he called me up one day and says, you know this stuff? I go, yeah. He goes, let's put a class together that's for normal people, that's fun, that they can learn stuff. So that's what we did. It can be used for, originally it was engineering, but for marketing, how to manage your husband better, how to manage your kids better, all of those things work fantastic. One example is lens one is called segmentation. So how do I break it into smaller pieces?
Okay.
Example I'm working on right now with advertisements for Facebook. When I'm doing an interview like this with you, if I'm interviewing a customer, breaking it into 15-second bits is way more effective than a 5-minute video, right?
Yeah.
On Instagram, that kind of thing. So how do you break it into pieces? Taking out is lens number two, which is how do you take things out of it to make it better or more creative? And one example I use all the time, and I kind of modeled it after this, was the original iPod came with no instructions. You people looked at it and they went, there's a play button, pause button, fast forward, rewind, volume up, down, and I plug in headphones. Okay. Right. So people would look at it. They made it so simple that that's part of the traction, right? Traction. At the same time, roughly the same time, the opposite was a BlackBerry. BlackBerry had 6,000 buttons on it and nobody could figure out how to use it, right? So it's like very few crackberry people finally figured out how to use it and then became addicted to it. But so it's taking things out. One of the simplest ones in photography, it's called frame line magnetism, so that you take stuff out of the frame so that your brain has to input information, which makes it more interesting. The simplest example, I tell everyone this: next time you go on vacation and you're taking a picture, take the picture like you always would. Now step twice as close to the subject, unless it's the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Twice as close to the subject as you can. Take the second picture. Almost always the second picture will be the one you keep. That's more interesting. It's the one you share, because information has been taken out and you're not telling the whole story, and it activates their brain to be more interested in it. So those are them. One last one, lens 13 is the other way around, is just do the opposite of everybody else. In the class that I teach in Austin, Texas, I teach it businesses, but with a thing called the Wizard Academy, I teach it at a lot in Austin, Texas. Kerry Mullis, he won the Nobel Prize for polymerized chain reaction, PCRs, in about every hospital there is in the world today. But he had never heard of this, but people that are naturally creative use one of these lenses or a couple of them unconsciously. And as explaining it to him, he said, yeah, lens 13 is exactly what I do. I do everything opposite everyone else. So at the time, people were trying to, I'm going to grossly simplify it because it's all I can do. In DNA research, you're trying to find a little gene and I want to study it. So I got to find a little bitty piece of the DNA and analyze it. Well, it's super hard to find. DNA is a tough molecule. You got to brutally beat it up to break it into pieces. It doesn't want to come apart. And then, so that's what everyone's trying to do. They're breaking it in a million pieces, picture throwing glass in the ground, and then I'm trying to find the right sliver. His logic was, why are you trying to do that? Just make the sliver, the needle in the haystack, duplicate itself. So that's what PCR is. It looks at the needle and says, hey, needle, duplicate yourself until the pile of needles is as big as a pile of hay.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And that's how he won the Nobel Prize. I mean, I oversimplified it, but that's his own words. I just did the opposite. Quit trying to find this little thing, make that little thing duplicate itself so that it isn't little anymore. And he's a chemist. He wasn't a biologist. So there's 40 of those lenses. There's hundreds of examples of stuff like that I use in the class and all, but that's it is. And again, it started off with engineering, but I've actually had more luck with managing your husband, marketing ideas, some product development ideas, how to run ads. And I tell you why, because I'm an engineer, I have the license to say this, because the engineers are not normally open enough to use a new tool like that. They're
Yeah.
like, I don't believe this creative thinking woo-woo stuff, right? In fact, we won't name the company, but just picture Fortune 500 company goes, I was explaining this to him and he goes, Mark, I don't want my people making damn paper airplanes. I go, okay. So this is at the time of TQM and all the 3-letter acronyms you can manage, remember in the early 90s. I go, okay, well, different course has nothing to do with creative thinking. It's called systematic idea generation. And I just started with all the buzzwords in his language that he wanted to hear. And he slammed his hand on the table. He goes, damn it, Mark, why did you waste my time? Why didn't you tell me that up front? Yeah, that's the class we want. Barbara, it's the exact same slides, except they're brown instead of blue, right? It's just, it's the exact same class, but I had to put it in his language, right? Because
I know.
I'll give you another great example is, so
got to repackage it for him.
to repackage it for him. And one thing that's really important, I think, is, so it's PEMF is what the Vibe is using currently, but I'm confident the therapies can be delivered with light, vibration, electrical current, all kinds of things. So I have a prototype over here that I've had for years about light and putting it on a table and just running the exact same protocol through light. And I did not know this till 3 weeks ago. I mean, I know it works, but I didn't know this till 3 weeks ago that your skin has light sensors on it.
Yeah.
We discovered that in 2000. I didn't know that. But MIT, all my friends have told me I'm crazy. You can't reverse Alzheimer's with light. Yeah, you can. And they accidentally discovered it with rats in a box, right? Is they ran 40 hertz in light. So now they have this big human study that they're doing to reverse plaque in the brain, that kind of thing. I was on a call with the guy that wrote the study from MIT 3 weeks ago. And he's like, wait a minute, how are you going to use light? Because you can't see it flicker past 40 hertz. I'm like, right, it's going to the skin receptors or energy's getting into your body. And he's just like, that won't work. I'm like, you wrote the article and you already said you didn't tape the rat's eyes open, so the energy got in there somehow, right?
Yeah.
I would have this already, Barbara. This is my end dream, and I'll shut up on that. This is my end dream. Smart lights, like I have right here, these Philips lights. Here's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to say, Alexa, run dementia in the kitchen, run Alzheimer's in the kitchen, run back pain, and nobody even knows they're getting a therapy. Now, I said that to somebody a month ago, and they go, Mark, you can't give somebody therapy without their proof. I go, okay, well, if it's your 85-year-old grandparent or your parents and they're suffering, yes, you can. Okay. Now, the reason I don't have that today, because some engineer at Philips decided when you turn the light switch on, he doesn't want the light to come on. She. They want to have a delay in it because it doesn't shock you, right? So it has like 100 millisecond delay or something in the light that I can't get around. So in the smart bridge over there, if anyone on this call is a Philips engineer about these lights, call me, because what we can do is take the existing lights and use an app on your phone to make those lights a therapeutic device. And I just had this call with a friend of mine who's a top radiologist in the country. When people think PEMF is woo-woo, it's like, okay, it's magnetic resonance. You ever heard of it? I had a doctor, I call them Facebook haters, Barbara, because they're all over the place. Every day I get called Hitler, you should die, where do you live, I want to come kill you. That's horrible.
Goodness, that's
No, these guys are brutal. It's like, this guy's like, you're a scumbag, you're such a loser. He goes, does it come with a bottle of snake oil? And then it had MD at the end of his name. I go, are you really a medical doctor? He goes, yeah, I am. I go, have you ever heard of an MRI? He goes, of course, we prescribe those all the time. I go, you know what it stands for, right? Magnetic resonance imaging. Imaging. And an MRI is a diagnostic tool, but it is the most magic on the planet. I still have no idea how that was discovered. Real brief, I'm going to tell you how MRI works, and you're going to go, that's impossible. So the protons in your body are all tilted randomly like the Earth. They have a north and south pole, okay? They're all random. You put somebody in an MRI machine, hit them with 50,000 Gauss. It makes all of those protons line up parallel to each other. That by itself creates its own magnetic field. So your body's now a magnetic field. Then you hit it with AM radio and FM radio, okay, depending on what you want to look at. Then you turn everything off. And when everything snaps back to where it's supposed to be, it releases energy that you magically capture on a Fourier transform that shows your liver. Okay, that is all this is doing is putting out energy to charge the cells in your battery. It's not doing all, but an MRI is accepted every day by millions of people because they think, yeah, okay, I get it. That works. Well, that can't work, but that one does it because they both do magnetic resonance. One is a therapy device and one is a diagnostic tool.
Well, it's very fascinating.
Thank you.
Fascinating to hear. Yeah. So,
it's the most fun I've ever had actually in my professional life of just playing with this stuff. It's because I get just a guy today, right? I told him to switch the protocols to, he didn't tell me to the end that he's diabetic and his blood sugar is 300. Oh, forget everything else I told you and just run insulin resistance and call me in a week, see if you're doing a whole bunch better. But I've had multiple military guys with, guns in the house to call me and say, hey, it changed my life. I had last summer a very good friend, 14-year-old boy, was suicidal. He ran it once and felt tons better. He's fine now. And if this doesn't put goosebumps on your arms, you're not human. Okay. I had 17-year-old young woman tell me, Mark, I've never had a date in my life because I have Tourette's. And I knew who she was. I assumed she did have Tourette's, but it did never come up, right? She goes, I ran brain balancing and my Tourette's are gone and I have a date on Saturday night. I just went, oh, gotta be kidding me, right? So I didn't know it could do that, right? I didn't know it could do anything like that. I get calls now every other day. Somebody will go, hey, do you have a protocol for AMCRT-PSC? Huh? I don't know what that is. So I go Google it and then it'll scare you to death because you don't ever want to go to the CDC without a cold drink, right? And go see all the stuff that's out there. But then I'll just read the basis. Is it nerve inflammation, right? And then I'll just say run general inflammation or run the fibromyalgia nerve protocol. And I've had 3 doctors now, all in the same week, told me, hey, this is really helping with MS. I go, I don't have an MS protocol. I go, what are you running? Fibromyalgia. And I'm not a doctor. I'm a rock scientist, so you got to be careful. But as I making suggestions now of go try these things, and it's super satisfying to see this. I'm trying to expand into the dog and cat world because arthritis in dogs, separation anxiety, relax and balance, all this stuff. We got these custom little bandanas where the Vibe fits inside of it, and then the dog wears the bandana for the therapy.
Is the device as big as about a mobile phone?
It's UK. Well, one sec. So all of my friends pick on me about this iPhone, that your phone is so small, I can't believe it. They don't make those anymore. I don't want a phone bigger than this. So this is the smallest phone on the market, and it's that big compared to it.
Okay, good. So it is. Don't worry, I've got a small phone.
Okay.
I don't want to carry a mini TV around.
Oh, some of the ones that are bigger than that, right? But and it only weighs by design, only weighs 2.4 ounces, because if you're wearing around your neck, even a couple ounces, can be annoying after 20 minutes. So.
Oh, for sure. So just want to ask you a little bit. I read in your bio that you pursue adventurous hobbies like ballooning. How did you get into that? Or building your own airplane? I mean, that sounds very interesting.
See, I'm going to date myself now on the hot air ballooning. I just saw one in college fly over me, and I said that'd be cool someday, So I went to Utah, and I was like, I still I need to look into that ballooning stuff. So I looked in the yellow pages. That's how old I am. Okay, and I looked up hot air ballooning. I was like, how do you get involved? This guy goes, yeah, come take a lesson. And so I did in Park City, Utah. I got hooked, and I've been flying balloons since then. I actually had my ballooning license before I got my airplane license. With the airplane, the answer's reasonably simple. I couldn't afford to buy one, right? So you buy a plane at the time at $200,000. You could buy a kit for $35,000 and spend 1,300 hours building it. But yeah, that was back in the 94 to 96. I still have that airplane. It has a personality. It gets very angry if you don't fly it enough. Yeah, you think I'm kidding? I just 2 days ago I hadn't flown it in 2 months because some things were broken on it, and we started up and it's angry. It just don't fly me for 5 minutes. Let me sit here and run. get used to it again. You can hear it. It's completely.
Needs some TLC, tender loving care, I think.
It does. I try to give as much TLC as I can. Yes.
Will you tell me a little bit about your work as a creative thinking consultant?
Most of it was what I mentioned earlier about the 40 lenses and stuff. There's some other things that I do too, but that's the main one that people like. I wrote a book called Da Vinci and the 40 Answers. So it's on Amazon. Plus, I still have the PDF for free, I think, on my website, slyasafox.com. But that's it. Is just teaching companies and businesses those 40 lenses, and if they grasp at the end of the course, if they can grasp 3 of them and try to use them. And it's the problem with ideas is the number one reason ideas fail is they never get started. Right? People talk about them, they don't do anything. So I force people, and I follow up with them, is how can you fail in 2 weeks? So go come up with, use this lens, come up with 200 ideas, pick the top 3, go test them in 2 weeks. Don't come up with an excuse of it's going to take 8 months and $500,000, so we can't do it, so therefore we didn't do anything. Right? So nobody can argue with go test it in 2 weeks. And it furthers the promise of the idea, or gives you some information. One of the quotes I use is, test uncomfortably early, right? And I've made that mistake myself so many times, it's ridiculous. Is get it out there as fast as you can. And everyone, if you're old enough to know the Palm Pilot story, the guy walked around with a wooden block and a toothpick for a year.
Yeah.
Right? That was his prototype. There's no electronics in it. He was just pretending it worked. Right? So that's it. It's basically using TRIZ, the 40 lenses of TRIZ, Da Vinci and the 40 Answers is the book I wrote around it with my friend Roy Williams, and it's just giving them practical, tactical, and strategic tools to look at things differently. It tries to tenderize your brain. I mean, you mentioned in their crop formations. At the end of this class that I do at the Wizard Academy, I actually give an 1.5-hour presentation on crop formations, just to more tenderize people's brains, because they can't believe what I'm telling them is real, and I'm giving them real data. So it's
so
it's just,
that was going to be my next question, because you mentioned that 95% of crop formations are not man-made, and you've got evidence to support this claim. So can we dive into this topic? And
sure. Yeah, absolutely. So it's sorry, I walked on you again. We got a little bit of a delay, but so it's I'm not obsessed with crop formations. I was just always kind of interested in them, and I was like, was there something here? So I say I'm not obsessed. I'm not, but I've read every book I think that's published in English that I can read, and I've met pretty much every researcher around the world, right, on crop formations. And it's there's a book called The Source Field Investigations, is by a guy named Wilcox, I believe, and it's book's this fat. And it's the craziest, weirdest stuff ever. And it was shocking to me at the end in the appendix, like he put, okay, I got to mention crop formations, but I don't want to discredit the rest of my book, but I'm going to do a couple pages. And I'm like, really? Okay, because everything else is way more crazy. And he had a picture of a crop formation that was not symmetrical, and it actually represented the number pi, 3.1415, right?
Yeah.
In a pizza type shape. So, and I'll explain what this is in a second. I called up Lucy Pringle and Michael Glickman, two of the top researchers in England at the time. I said, did you guys go in this formation? They said, yeah. I go, was it authentic, meaning not man-made? And they go, yep. I go, you got to be kidding me. So I told my wife, we're going to go research this stuff part of the summer. She told her boss what she was doing, and he goes, you must really love him, right? You're going to go research crop formations with him. But that blew my mind. It's like there's intelligence behind that, because it's not geometrical cybernetics or whatever, like shaking dirt on a sand or whatever on a acoustic speaker, right? So I came up with a 15-point checklist from all of the books and research, and talked to all the researchers, and they go, you nailed it. Okay, you summarize it. So number one, by far, is it man-made or not? Number one is, if it's man-made, it's going to be stomped over and broken. period. They're broken
Yeah.
in where they smashed it with a board. If it's authentic, it'll be laid over, and if you don't step on it, it'll stand back up in a couple days.
Okay.
The telltale signature is the knuckle on, let's go with wheat, but it's in a lot of things. It will be bent at about 45 degrees and it'll be inflamed. So it looks like it has been reproduced with microwave radiation, that you can do that to wheat. So soon as that study came out, the scientists that are paid by ABC and all those guys to keep misinformation out there, I won't mention his name, but he's horrible. He goes, I can't believe anyone even believe this. He goes, oh, we figured it out now. College kids are walking around with microwave ovens and they're going like this in the field. I'm like, really? And people are going to buy that. But then people went, yeah, okay, never mind. So knuckles are one. You will find, oftentimes you will find little BBs of iron, which means that soil got up to 800 degrees centigrade because it turned the iron in the dirt into a BB, but it didn't catch anything on fire. Okay. There's all kinds of signature energy there that very common for your cell phone or your digital camera to fail.
Yeah.
I had my cell phone, I went like this inside of it, 0 bars, went like that outside of it, and 4 bars. It did fry my camera. It fried my camera, meaning it would take pictures, but the LCD screen on the back would always flicker. It's weird. I still have that. So sometimes there's a little things of silicone dirt in little piles. And then when you start looking at it just from the human factor, okay, is wait a minute, you go, and this is a lot of people have done these studies. Like there is a formation, for example, extremely large one that happened in 10 minutes at 5 in the afternoon near Stonehenge. They know it was 10 minutes because there's a whole bunch of tourists there. It wasn't there, and then it's there, right? And they estimated something like 1,000 guys a month to make that, right? So if there was people out there, so let's assume everyone's paying and they're making all these, they're all man-made. Where are these people? Because I've spent time there. You know, if you're hanging out in Wiltshire, England, you got like 2 B&Bs. There's no hotels or anything around it, right? Is where are all these people camping, housed? They're not there. And then what the term most people would not know is called rheology. It's a science of flow, which I know a lot about because it's very important in making rockets. But the wheat will be like layered and stuff that would take you thousands of hours to do by hand. There's one formation called the basket, which is actually a woven basket. Like there's like 50 to 80 woven baskets all standing up vertical that you are woven like a wicker basket. It's like, how would you do that? Right. So there's a lot of telltale signs like that. There's now the ones that are man-made usually have mud prints everywhere and stuff's broken. Right. And there's definitely about 5% of them that are man-made. They're not, and here's a big myth, they're not just in England. It's just the amount of people in the United States that are researching and looking for crop formations are 1.5 people. I'm the half. They're the real person, some lady up in Massachusetts area, right? So Wiltshire, England, there's one airplane, a 2-person plane, like a pilot and a guy. Those are the only people in the air looking for this stuff, right? You have drones now. In the old days, you didn't. So they happen everywhere in the world. They're very common. It just farmers don't report them, right? So we probably have time in America, in the United States, but nobody's looking for them, right? So but one of the last thing I think that's super interesting, and I've been telling people for 20 years about this, is how much nobody cares. It's like, I'll tell my friend, I have rocket science friends, they're smart people, right? And they're like, yeah, I got a soccer game and I ain't got time for this, right? They can't fill their head with it. And the analogy I used the other day, because this is a statistic I heard in the last month, I don't know is picture every grain of sand on the planet Earth. How many grains of sand are there? We now think that for every grain of sand on the Earth, there's probably 10,000 galaxies. You can't wrap your head around. You can't even wrap your head around a handful of sand, right? So I think it's very interesting. There's Wiltshire still has about 50 every summer, right? So it's anyway, more of just not obsessed with it, just more of an interesting phenomena. And there's a whole bunch of branches and connections to that, but that's a long answer to the crop formations.
I know. Well, in closing, if our listeners want to connect with you, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so it's Resona Health, so like resonance, RESONA
Yeah.
/ your name, Barb. So Resona Health, Resona.health / Barbara. There's no .com in there, and that's the thing people get confused on. So it's just Resona.health / Barbara. There's a whole bunch more information. You can go into the rabbit hole as deep as you want, into thousands. You can start with a very top level and keep going deeper. I have multiple ebooks that I've written on it. I got other people's research, and then there's a great discount for them if they want to buy one and try it. And if you think it's voodoo, so do I still a little bit. Okay, so I tell people in the end, the punchline is try it for 30 days. If it doesn't help you, send it back. I'll give you your money back. I don't want any single person having one that's paid for it if it didn't help them. I don't need any more Facebook haters.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think they try it and they like it, it's fine. Well, I think it was very interesting. And thank you for coming on the show. You're a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'll come visit you in Cyprus. I assume it's beautiful there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You're always welcome.
Thanks for listening to Barbara's podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter or e-courses. Celebrate life, and see you at the next episode.